Hello, bonjour, namaste, ni hao, and ohio, everybody. What is going on? It is Galeriot here. Welcome back to the YouTube channel once again for another Danmachi video. And today, we're going to be reviewing Danmachi Season 4, Episode 20, Estrella Familia. I cannot wait to talk about this episode, even though it's been a couple of days since the episode has aired, which I do apologize on. I'll get on to why in just a second. I am very excited to be talking about this episode because it was insane. You know, it was honest to God insane. But yeah, once again, I do apologize on taking a couple of days to actually get this video out and this review out. Part of it is because I wanted to take a couple of days to actually reflect on the episode, because after last week's Coliseum episode and your guys' comments on that video where I reviewed the episode, I wanted to take a couple of days to reflect on the episode because a lot of you guys thought that I was being a bit too nice in that episode. And of course, after a few days of reflecting, I still felt more or less the same way I did in that review. But I did understand a lot of your concerns and issues with the episode and whatnot, which I do think I could have probably gotten across a lot better if I had taken a couple of days to actually reflect on the episode right in that video. But for the most part, I still felt the same way I did during that review and then after a few days of that video. So in all honesty, a couple of days to reflect on the episode wouldn't have made a huge difference, but I do think that at least I would have been maybe a little bit more harsher on JC staff. I probably would have been a little bit more harsher on the production committee. Who knows? We don't know. I don't know. I can't go back and change that episode. But another reason why this is taking a couple of days, I probably would have gotten this video out on Saturday instead of Thursday, which is when the episodes air. But it's taken a little bit longer than that as well because of some IRL stuff. So I do apologize on that. So hopefully you guys go on to enjoy this review, because we're going to get right into it in just a second. And if you do so, please be sure to leave a like down below, subscribe to the channel for more Danmachi content, and leave a comment down below letting me know what do you guys think about Danmachi Season 4 Episode 20. I'm very curious to see what you guys think. Do you guys like it, dislike it? What do you guys think could have been done better? Where could you have improved the episode? Stuff like that. Let me know in the comment section down below. I'm very curious to see what you guys have to say down below. Now, let's talk about Danmachi Season 4 Episode 20. What a brutal episode. What a brutal episode. I mean, we knew what was coming in this episode. A lot of us knew what was coming in this episode. Let's be real. This was probably the most non-spoilery spoiler that everybody knew about, pretty much. Let's be real. Because we knew that the Estrella Familia death sequence was coming. After the numerous flashback sequences we were going to get this big flashback sequence of course, the Australia, yeah. The Estrella Familia, yeah, they're down under, baby. They're from down under, really on from down under. No, but the Estrella Familia, right? We knew that they were gonna do their first and, well, last attempt against the Juggernaut in this episode, and boy oh boy was it executed to another level. I mean, no opening this time round, no ending as well, which we'll talk about later on in this video, but no opening, no ending, just straight in. Now, the one thing I do feel that could have been done better in my personal opinion, and I know that maybe they didn't want to linger too much on that sequence and they wanted to focus more so on the repercussions of what happened to Ryu after the whole situation and her destruction of the Rudra Familia and stuff like that and whatnot. What happens after the Juggernaut fight and the Juggernaut incident, I suppose, right? I felt like they could have led into the Juggernaut a little bit slower. I think it was a bit too fast in my personal opinion. I'm not gonna lie, I think that's my first critique of this episode, if I have to give any critique to the episode. I still think they did a brilliant job overall in terms of what they of like how they portrayed Ryu's character development throughout the entire episode, in terms of like, you know, what happened, the incident, and the Rudra Familia, her being saved by Seer, and then of course the end sequence when we come back to present day, right? I do think that they could have probably handled that a little bit better in terms of the lead into everything, because it felt instant. And to be fair, the actual deaths were instant. They were instant. They had no time to react, to fall back or anything. They had no time. The Juggernaut came in and absolutely obliterated them, and it was shown unbelievably well. I mean, it was a it was not even, it was a one-sided demolition derby basically is what it was, right? And the thing I wanted was more so like them going towards the Rudra Familia and stuff like that, and the interactions with with the members of Evilis and stuff like that, and Jura, of course, right? So that would be my only nitpick of that sequence, of that flashback sequence. But I think overall, unbelievably brutal. Like I said, the gore, the destruction, insane. Now, what I am surprised about was the lack of a disclaimer. I know some people on Twitter actually mentioned that there was a disclaimer, but the way I was watching it didn't have a disclaimer, which was really weird, because Danmachi season 4 airs at 11 p.m. if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, it airs at 11 p.m. in Japan, or 11:30 p.m. in Japan, which is technically right before you can actually start airing a lot of these gory things. Now, I don't know if 11:30 or 11 p.m. is constituted in that. I've always thought of it as like, oh, after 12 a.m. is when they usually can show these things, which I was surprised about the fact that they didn't make a disclaimer, at least in the section, in the episode that I was watching it in. So a bit surprised on that front. Maybe it isn't actually a part of it, and I've just been misunderstanding how the scheduling works for Japan, right? Because I thought the R-rated stuff, the gore and all that jazz, could only be shown after 12 a.m. basically, right? But either way, I mean, hey, the fact that they could show it off without a disclaimer is insane in itself, but the fact that they showed it in the first place is brilliant. The fact that they went all the way to that point is great. And I know a lot of people will bring it up, well, why couldn't they do it for previous episodes? Well, at this point, I have no idea, to be quite honest. I think if they could do it in this episode, then why not do it in the previous episodes? I will agree with people on that. I don't know if it's a decision by the production committee to basically be like, we can't allow for too much gore because that might detract us from, a more general audience, which is also a fair point, right? A general audience wouldn't want to see gore day in, day out and all that jazz. Obviously, when the situation demands it, it's good to actually have that in this episode, especially, right? In this situation, it's very much important to have it. But in other episodes, you could say that they could kind of get away with not having that much gore, right? For example, in the Colosseum episode, I know some people were asking them to be actually lathered in monster guts and actually show it, right? Again, the whole show don't tell situation, right? But you can kind of get away with it if they just say it, right? And in my personal opinion, I think they still can get away with it, and it'll allow them to still have a more general audience. Because I'm not gonna sit here and say like I'm gonna show a 13-year-old or 14-year-old this episode, even though they may watch it on their own. I wouldn't actively show this to my kid, right? That's the idea. And I guess they want to kind of instill that whole thing in other episodes, right? At least say like, oh, this is okay for general audiences, but here's one episode where we might go a little bit crazy. Again, that's the reason why I'm a little bit surprised that there was no disclaimer. But yeah, outside of that, I think they handled that extremely well. I think they handled the emotions. The BGM was fantastic. The sounds were brilliant. Overall, again, fantastic job in that whole sequence, and it was handled well. I have nothing else to add on top of that. But then afterwards, of course, right, throughout the entire episode, with, of course, Ryu going after the Rudra Familia and stuff like that, it was well handled, in my personal opinion. One thing I think that they could have probably also... I'm trying to think of ways they could have maybe done it a little bit better, but I think they did a good job overall in just portraying, like, the whole situation of, like, oh, Ryu didn't want to come back. Ryu wanted to obviously chase after the Rudra Familia, get after them, deal with the remains of obviously the familiar members, which obviously got devoured by monsters and stuff like that. There was nothing left of them. And just generally, all that entire sequence basically of Ryu basically coming to grasp or coming to grips with what happened exactly, right? In those flashback sequences. This episode was pretty much one extended flashback sequence. I think 13 to 14 minutes of it was literally just Ryu's past basically, which I think was absolutely fair, and it was necessary, especially because it led into the aftermath of the Colosseum, right, which we'll get onto in just a second. But yeah, I think they did a great job. It was brilliant. And let's talk about the no OP and no ED situation. I think once again a brilliant decision by them to go with it. No intro animation, no ending animation, just have the ending song playing in the background as well as the opening soundtrack, or a variant of the soundtrack, I should say, because they decided to include a different song, right, when the Juggernaut fight was happening instead, right? So that was, I think, well done as well. It's something similar to what ReZero and a couple of other shows have done in the past, but it's a very rare action. A lot of series still like to just have like an opening sequence and ending sequence, and that takes like 3 to 4 minutes. I know a lot of people have been begging for them to stop doing that in anime, generally speaking, not just Danmachi. I've seen it for so many other shows, right, especially shows that require you to basically fill in a lot of the minutes with a lot of content. But if like the opening and ending take a lot of that time, then it gets really annoying, because you could have easily put a lot of that content during those periods instead, right? But that's not gonna change. I think this is a one-off, and they could do it because of the episode and the impact of this episode. Generally speaking, they wouldn't do that though. It's an unfortunate thing, because I would love for them to do something like what ReZero does, which is just go straight into the episode, OP soundtrack in the background or ED in the background, and just keep running with it. Don't stop the show. Do not stop the show for an opening or ending. Just go in, right? But yeah, that's something that they did really well in this episode for sure, right? I think they did a fantastic job. And let's talk about the end of the episode now, right? In terms of the Belle and Ryu situation, right? And of course the end with the river and all of that jazz, right? I think a great job was done, in all honesty. Now, I would say that maybe they could have portrayed Belle being more damaged, I suppose, and they kind of did show it, right, with him falling into the water automatically, him being unable to basically move that much whatsoever, especially when the monster was approaching them, right? Even though he wanted to use that as a bit of a surprise tactic, right? He had to take that to his advantage. He was basically that damaged, basically, right? And again, this is kind of a follow-up of the last episode's issues in a way, right, where they didn't show him that damaged. I do think in the last episode that was a mistake they made, was the lack of damage on Belle. They didn't show it too much, and then this episode he seems extremely damaged, which is exactly how it should have been in the first place. It's just that the last episode's ending, right, especially with him coming down to help Ryu out, they didn't do a great job there in showing how damaged he actually was. So again, an issue of the last episode, but that's besides the point. I do not want to go back to the last episode lest other people come after me once again, but either way, but yeah, I think overall this episode was handled extremely well. Some things could have been done better here and there, but overall, again, this is really good from JC staff. Again, good management, I would say, in terms of the budget. If there is a budget and budget constraints, and they're trying to make sure that they're optimizing where they place stuff, I think it's a great decision to put everything on this episode rather than the last episode, in my personal opinion. Even though I would have loved the Colosseum sequence to be beautiful and unbelievable and perfect 10 out of 10, we have to remember that they are on a week-to-week basis here, first and foremost, and obviously this is not a ufotable or anything of that sort. This is still JC staff, regular old JC staff. They take 50,000 anime every single year pretty much, and are basically not perfect in any shape or form. Maybe in the future we can hope for more. Maybe the Blu-ray DVD edition can be better, but in terms of like the episodes we get from on a week-to-week basis, this is a company that we can't expect a crazy amount from, in all honesty. And I have to say that because I know a lot of people actually think that they are the second coming of Jesus Christ and they should be able to do anything they want, basically, which is not what happens in this situation, right? So let's go over to Reddit now, and let's talk about what other people think in this Reddit post. So this is of course for light novel readers, so we're gonna see a lot of people talking about the light novel and how they feel coming from the light novel to the anime. Remember that I also have read the light novel. It's just that my memory for the light novel is a little bit spotty because I haven't read volume 14 in ages, to be quite honest, right? So forgive me for misremembering things if I've forgotten something or if I've misremembered a detail. I do apologize for that. So let's look at this. Faraboof, JC Staff, I really apologize for all the crap I've said about you over the course of years. You nailed this, you really did. I know the source material was top shelf, but this is unquestionably the most emotive and gripping chapter in the entire anime for me. Best wishes episode of the show. When they gave Alize the Gainax dread treatment, I was almost in tears. I love how he brings in Gainax. That's fantastic. Music, dialogue, action, everything. Sayuri Hayami was once again stellar as Ryu. Thumbs up on that. I agree on that one. She's gonna become even more of a fan favorite than she already is, especially for anime onlys. Meanwhile, SO fans, yeah. SO, I don't know what they're doing at Sword Art Online. That's tough, man. That is absolutely tough. Should note the novel referenced events that happened in Sword Art Online, but the anime completely left those out. That is true. That is true. I do remember a couple of the Sword Art Online references now that he's mentioned it, but yeah, they didn't mention it whatsoever. Again, maybe they might mention it in the future. Maybe they'll never mention it. They'll never mention it, but it is what it is. Alright, while they absolutely nailed this episode, it does not excuse what they have previously done with this series. Yes, I don't think it excuses them, but you have to also understand what they've done. You can say they could have done better if, okay, this really just cements how much they could have been doing how much better they could have done over the years if they truly cared about the project and not just single episodes. You have to understand how anime is done in Japan, and especially during this period. I know so many shows, like I think it was Bofuri, Ayakishi Triangle, and a couple of other shows. They're all getting delayed. The fact that Danmachi hasn't gotten delayed goes to show that they are managing the project extremely well in potentially situations that aren't going really well in Japan, especially potentially due to COVID, right? And not to mention, right, this is JC Staff. I reiterate, this is JC Staff. It's a regular Joe anime studio. This is not an anime studio on the level of Ufotable. This is not an anime studio on the level of Kyoto Animations, and we're unlikely to ever get them unless we get a huge budget, or either the production committee actually wants to invest that much money into Danmachi, which I don't think they'll ever want to do. And I think JC Staff likes Danmachi. Don't get me wrong. I don't think JC Staff is treating it like a normal anime or anything of that sort. We wouldn't have gotten 4 seasons, a movie, and everything with JC Staff if that was the case. I do think JC Staff actually likes Danmachi. It's just that we have to remember it's not a big production studio. They aren't a big production studio. Let's be real. And yes, you can say that they've done big things before with certain scientific railgun, a certain magical index, and stuff like that. But even they had issues. I remember a lot of issues in a certain magical index season 3. I remember there being some issues even in railgun. So JC Staff isn't a big production studio, and nobody should be thinking that they can. Do you want to give Danmachi to another studio? That's my alarm. I'm gonna shut that down. If you want to give Danmachi to a better studio, you're gonna have to hope that the production committee wants to cough up the money to give it to a big production studio like Ufotable or something. Honestly, that's pretty much it. Now, it should be if the producer gives them enough time to care about the project. It's time and money. It's both. It's actually both. I think time, yes, I agree with time, and you can tell that, yes, Danmachi season 4 is on a far superior level compared to season 3 and season 2 because it's been given the time. We have a 22 episode season this time round, unlike previous seasons where we've had 11 or 12 episodes at most. We've had a break in between so that they can actually work on the season as well, right? In between in the fall season of 2022, we took a break and then came back for the winter season, right? So again, yeah, like I said, it's a good blend of them getting a little bit more time, but they just still don't have the money and the facilities to go above and beyond and be on the level of like a Demon Slayer or anything of that sort. So that's my personal opinion. I will I will screw up a random amount of episodes in various anime to my heart's content, and then without warning I will drop the hardest fire you've seen week after week. The duality of JC staff. That is true. Yeah, I think the author helped with season 4. That is also true. Omori Sensei coming in for this season has definitely helped out way more as well. And I'm pretty sure he might have been the one to actually talk about potentially not having the OP and ED as well in this episode, maybe, right? So yeah, that's my personal thought process on that. So yeah, I thought IoT was back tomorrow. This was easily this year's most brutal anime scenes. I do think it'll be one of the most surprisingly brutal anime sequences. I don't think it'll be the most brutal because there are gonna be those anime that air at like stupid o'clock times and then they are just super brutal for no reason. But I do think that this is definitely one of the more surprisingly brutal anime sequences for sure. Alright, let's see. 20 out of 10. Thank you, JC Staff. I'm crying. Damn, I never expected this from JC Staff. This episode felt better than the whole of season 2. Anything feels better than the whole of season 2, man. Season 2 was a depressing watch, man. I'm not gonna lie. For a person who loves the content from season 2, volumes 6 and 7, I really love those two volumes, right? It was depressing to watch that season because of how bad it was, man. I think episode 20, this episode was definitely on the upper side of one of the best Danmachi episodes, you know, for sure. So yeah. So this is where the screwing budget went. What an amazing episode. No OP, no ED. They knew what was up. They knew what was up indeed. Yeah, no, I think they did a good job here. Of course, he talks about the Juggernaut and the skill set of the Juggernaut and how brutal it was. The death being brutal as well. And how the stabbing was. It was very good. I think overall pretty darn good for sure. Oh, and thank God they got rid of Ryu's fake out slap. They had always bothered me, so you just fell in love with this guy and then you want to hit him. No, this does it so much better. I think that's cool as well. The idea that Bell was on his last life, yeah, that was something that I mentioned as well, right? Is like, you know, they did it well enough in my personal opinion. I think they could have done it a little bit better maybe, but I think they did a good enough job once again for sure, right? I do think they did a good enough job in that regards. All right, I want to go down here. Of course, they're talking about why did Estrella tell Ryu to give up on justice? To basically explain things, right? She knew Ryu would be consumed by her vengeance. I'm gonna read this guy's text because it'll be easier for me, to be quite honest. So she asked her to give up what she perceived as justice then, hoping that she will find a sense of justice that let her live on, as per the wishes of her friends who give up their lives to save hers. One can claim she achieved what Estrella hoped for thanks to her journey with Bell, and more so because of him, as he showed her the impact of her deeds, and that justice will prevail more in life than in death. There you go. But yeah, I think a lot of people may be a little bit confused as to why Estrella didn't mention anything of that sort, or why Estrella told her to give up and all that jazz. That is the reason why. That is the reason why. Jesus, these animators hit us with the max with the viciousness this episode. They really went all out visually and audibly gave us a recreation of someone being burnt alive by a flamethrower. That was insane, honestly. They also showed us someone getting both her arms amputated as she continued to fight, and then had someone begging not to get eaten. Oh man. Yeah, no, I do think this is great. And I think that's one more thing. He makes a good point here, Dr. Zero H. I think one of the best things that Omori did in the light novel, and of course in this episode as well, is that we've had a build-up through the flashback sequences of, okay, we know what's going to happen at the end of this, but why are you showing us this flashbacks? Because it gets us connected to these older characters who are, you know, going to inevitably die, but it at least gives us some form of connection and, you know, leaves us like, I knew it was coming, but god damn, you know. I think that's a good thing for sure. That is definitely a good thing. All right, so yeah, let's see what else is here. All right, okay, I want to see if there's anything I want to look at maybe potentially, right? I was thinking that they spared budget for something considering the last episodes. I was right, the whole budget went to the slaughter of Estrella Familia. That was so fun. Oh, I mean, brutal, yeah, brutal, especially riders on those mages. Though sometimes I don't understand power scale in this series. While being sick, Althea was much stronger and really tried to kill them like the hundreds, thousands she killed during 7 years ago. Of course, he's talking about the events of Estrella record, right? Them getting wrecked so easily didn't make much sense. Well, not gonna judge author's power scale at this point. point, too bothersome to do. So that is also fair. In all honesty, power scale, every series has this issue with power scaling. There's no real point in power scaling because things can go anyhow, and plot armor is always a thing, right? I'm so glad that they cut the part where Ryu kept hitting Bell. My boy needs to be appreciated, not to get beaten for doing good. I mean, if something is much faster than you and has the ability to one-shot you, of course it's gonna wreck you, not to mention they didn't know anything about it. Well, yeah, he mentions, of course, Althea got weaker every attack, so they could survive a first attack, meant that they could survive the subsequent attacks. Though, realistically, the first attack should have insta-killed them. I mean, the thing is, right? Well, one, of course, Amori has this issue with power scaling, right? But two, like Smiling Ice Cube said, I think the Juggernaut was just much more of a surprise in comparison to Althea. At least with Althea, it's one mage, right? It's one female mage character, right? Who's obviously getting weaker because of her curse, right? Because of her disease. So there is obviously that factor there, but the Juggernaut is a huge monster that nobody had an idea on what was happening. And then of course you have the Rudra Familia on the other side, members of Evilis on the other side, and it's just like, what the hell is going on, right? And yeah, I mean, I think it's just shock. Like, it's just shock. You could see Ryu just going into shock. And with the case of Althea, they didn't know what they were going up against entirely, but they generally knew that whoever this was extremely powerful, right? So I think there's that discrepancy between the two necessarily. I urge you guys, if you guys haven't already, right, if you're an anime only or you're a light novel reader who hasn't read it yet, go read Astrea Record because it gives it in a lot more detail. Because even I'm not gonna lie, I don't remember much of the Astrea Record right now. I still need to reread it so that I can make a video on it sometime during this week, right? But this is a story I read about 3 to 4 years ago. So for me, it's hard to remember exactly what went down in the sequences of events. That's why I'm trying to remember exactly how they fought Althea. That's the reason why I'm trying to think, was it like the element of surprise? Did Althea just come out of nowhere? Like, how was the fight exactly done? But yeah, I do think just straight up like a somewhat of a human mage, I suppose. A mage going versus a huge Juggernaut monster that comes out of nowhere. I think the Juggernaut does have a huge advantage over there. Not to mention, of course, you have to remember they're on top of Verario. They've got a couple of things in favor of them and stuff like that in the overground rather than in the dungeon. So yeah, that's something I would probably make in mind. Oh, somebody put it here. Althea didn't ambush them. They attacked her fully prepared and with a plan from Phil. And okay, yeah, there you go. I was like, I don't remember exactly if it wasn't an ambush. I knew Althea didn't just ambush them, but I couldn't remember for the life of me exactly what was the situation. Did they know her full power? Did they go in knowing she was strong, but didn't know how strong she was, right? But yeah, this is true. This is very, very true from some random. Absolutely true. I've been quite critical of the season primarily due to the generally poor translation of how the dungeon is in the show when you compare it into the novels. But this episode did a great job of capturing it. Yes, I do agree. This episode probably was one of the better representations of the dungeon, in all honesty. I'd love this season, but yeah, I guess it's the budget. I think it's a combination of, like I said, budget, JC staff's inconsistencies, which are present, to be quite honest, and of course, like I said, generally, they are not a big budget studio. So yeah, that's something to take note of course. So yeah, let's go all the way down, and I think we are going to wrap it up there in terms of the review. Hang on, I want to see what this guy says. Oh my god, okay. I'm a little sad about this episode. This episode is quite gory. I sort of wish they could have kept the rating PG-13, but they really went the other direction. Really? Wow. Interesting that somebody wanted to go PG-13 there. I don't think this episode should have been PG-13 anyways. I was really hoping that there would be a disclaimer at the start of the episode. I was a little bit concerned when I didn't see a rating or a disclaimer at the start of the episode, but they still pulled it off immensely. So yeah, very interesting. I'm just gonna skim through this really quickly. So I really hope they would somewhat gloss over Ryu's revenge. Really? Nah. I don't know about this. I don't know about this. This is very weird. So for me personally, right, I can. In this, the part was rushed, and it shouldn't have been. Okay, 1 second. So let me see. the rating of this episode is going to put it out for of reach for a large amount of people who could have been interested in this otherwise. This is the point I was talking about earlier on with, them trying to attract a more general audience with other episodes, and this episode being obviously R-rated more so, right? Especially with how well constructed this second part of season 4 of this anime has been. It has also ended up taking the emphasis off and taking time away from what I think should have been the focus of this episode, which is the conversation and argument between Ryu and Belle. This part was rushed, and it shouldn't have been. It should have been the emotional highlight. I mean, it was still a good highlight of the episode, especially because it was the end part of the episode. It was given enough time, and you were given enough context with what happened to Ryu to understand why she feels the way she does, and you could tell that that's the exact way it went. I think it's absolutely fine. Because I do think the important part is to understand Ryu's background story, because once you understand Ryu's background story, you understand her actions in the last episode, and you understand her conversation and her argument in this episode, and why, and obviously Belle's comebacks after that, right? So I do think that to an extent, I disagree with this sequence. Let's see what else is there. Of course, I responded to Firebolter's points. I don't think it's a situation of them wanting to do every episode as a banger and not doing it because they don't want to do it. It's just you have to realize, you have to understand exactly how the anime industry works and the situation behind the anime industry. So let me know what you guys thought about the episode. I'm very curious to see what you guys have to say down below. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Once again, I do apologize on the delays it took to get this video out. Once again, appreciate all of y'all for tuning into these videos. Hopefully this week, when we do get the anime review, it'll probably be on Saturday rather than Monday again. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please be sure to leave a like down below, subscribe to the channel, and I will see you guys next time. Take it easy, everybody. Bye-bye.